Saturday morning, 1985. You've got your pocket money in your fist, your mum's got the shopping list, and the high street is absolutely heaving. Every shop doorway breathes its own smell out at you as you pass. Vinyl and plastic from the record shop, warm sugar from the bakery, that strange chemical newness from the electrical shop on the corner. Here's what nobody told you that morning. Almost every one of those shops was going to die. Not slowly, not gently. Some of them collapsed in weeks. Chains with hundreds of branches, names that felt as permanent as the post office, wiped off the map so completely that if you said them to a teenager today, they'd look at you blankly. So let's walk that high street one more time. The stores of 1980s Britain that no longer exist, starting with the ones you'd half forgotten and ending with the ones that still sting. Let's begin with Bayjam. If your family had a chest freezer in the garage, and in the 80s, that freezer was practically a member of the family, Bayjam is where you filled it. Founded by John Apthorpe in 1968, back when barely any British homes owned a freezer, Bayjam bet everything on frozen food and won. Crispy pancakes, Arctic roll, boxes of burgers, bags of mixed veg the size of pillows. All of it hauled home in the boot and stacked like treasure, because a full freezer in 1985 felt like genuine security. The shops themselves had a chill to them, a low hum of 100 chest freezers, and the particular pleasure of leaning into one until your arms went numb. By the late 80s, there were over 250 branches. And then came the twist. In 1989, Bayjam was swallowed by Iceland, a company that was actually smaller than it was. The name vanished almost overnight. Same freezers, same shops, different sign over the door. Most people never even noticed the funeral. Then there was Tandy, the shop your dad got lost in. Officially, it was the British arm of America's Radio Shack, and it sold things no other shop on the high street understood. Capacitors, cables, soldering irons, walkie-talkies, and those early home computers that promised the future. The staff would famously ask for your name and address if you bought so much as a battery. For a certain kind of kid, the kind who took the radio apart to see inside, Tandy was church. But when electronics became something you replaced instead of repaired, Tandy's whole reason for existing dissolved. The UK stores were rebranded away around the turn of the millennium, and the tinkerers lost their home. Next, Athena. You might not remember the name, but you absolutely remember the posters. Athena was where teenage Britain decorated its bedroom walls. That tennis girl scratching her behind. The muscled man cradling a baby, which reportedly sold by the million, Che Guevara, dolphins leaping through neon. Every purchase came rolled into a tube, and carrying that tube home felt like carrying your own personality under your arm. The shop itself glowed. Spotlit prints, black shelving, a place that felt more like a gallery than anywhere else a 15-year-old was allowed to loiter unbothered. At its peak, Athena had well over 100 shops. But posters, it turned out, were a fad wearing the costume of an institution. The chain collapsed into administration in 1995, and bedroom walls have frankly never recovered. At number 5, Our Price. The record shop for the rest of us. HMV was big and glamorous. Our Price was the one squeezed in near Boots, with the red sign and the singles chart on the wall, where you queued on a Monday to buy the number 1 on cassette for a couple of quid. Started in 1971 with a single London shop, it grew to hundreds of branches, tucked into every town that mattered. This is where you bought your first single with your own money. And you can still remember what it was, can't you? The flick, flick, flick of fingers through the racks, the plastic smell of fresh shrink wrap, the carrier bag swinging against your leg all the way home. Buying music was a physical act then, with a walk and a weight to it. Then music stopped being a thing you held in your hand. Downloads arrived, supermarkets undercut everyone, and by the early 2000s the red sign was gone from every high street in Britain. Number 4. Rumbelows. The electrical shop where half of Britain rented its telly and bought its first video recorder, usually on the Never Never, paid off in weekly instalments. Rumbelows sat on some 500 high streets at its height, all beige boxes and price tags on swing tickets, staffed by men in ties who could genuinely explain what a VHS was. And Rumbelows didn't fade away. It was executed. In early 1995, its owner, Thorn EMI, simply shut the entire chain, hundreds of shops, thousands of jobs, in one announcement. 1 week it was where you paid off the telly. The next it was an empty unit with a whitewashed window. Number 3, and this one was a giant, Littlewoods. The Liverpool empire, built by John Moores, who made his first fortune on the football pools and his second on the high street. Littlewoods was the department store for families who weren't made of money. School uniforms, coats that had to last 2 winters, and the famous catalogue, that phone book-sized doorstop of dreams that arrived twice a year. Half the country's Christmases came out of a Littlewoods catalogue, paid off at so much a week through an agent, usually somebody's auntie. Children learned to read the toy pages like scripture, corners folded down, items circled in biro, hope itemised across 2 glossy spreads. At its peak, the wider Moores empire was one of the biggest private companies in Europe. But the high street stores couldn't survive the new century. The last of them closed in 2005, and the name retreated to the internet, a ghost wearing its own face. Number 2, C&A, the Dutch-owned clothing giant that dressed Britain for every occasion it couldn't quite afford to dress better for. School trousers, holiday shorts, your first proper coat. C&A's own brands were legends in themselves, Clockhouse for teenagers, and the mighty Avanti ski jackets that every kid in the playground wore through the winter of 1988, whether or not they had ever seen a ski. It was easy to mock. Kids swore the letters stood for coats and ats. But everybody shopped there, and everybody knew exactly where everything was, because every branch felt identical. Then fashion got fast. Next and Topshop above, supermarkets below. C&A closed all of its British stores by 2001, walking out of the country after nearly 80 years. And an entire tier of the high street, decent, unglamorous, affordable, went with it. And number 1, British Home Stores. BHS. The one whose death was recent enough and ugly enough that it still feels raw. For over 80 years, BHS was simply there, lighting departments that glittered like Aladdin's cave, sensible bedding, school shoes, and a cafe where your nan could get a cup of tea and a toasted tea cake and watch the world go by. It was never cool. It was never meant to be cool. It was reliable, and in return, Britain gave it something better than love, habit. And then came the part that still makes people angry. Sold for £1 in 2015, collapsed within 13 months, gone by August 2016, taking 11 Esuzumran jobs and leaving a hole in the pension fund, and in 160-odd towns, a hole in the high street the size of a cathedral. Plenty of those buildings are still empty today. Walk past one and look up. You can usually still see the shadow where the letters used to be. So what actually happened? The internet, we say, and that's partly true. Retail parks, out-of-town superstores, fast fashion, all true. But here's what really gets me. Those shops weren't just shops. They were the places where Saturdays happened, where you learned to handle money, where you met people you knew on every visit, where the woman on the till watched you grow up. The high street was the closest thing a town had to a living room. We didn't just lose some brands. We lost the walk, the crowd, the bumping into people. We lost the version of ourselves that clutched a pound coin outside Woolworths. But that's a story for another day. So tell me, which one do you miss? Which doorway? Which smell? Which Saturday? Put it in the comments, because somebody else remembers that exact same shop, in that exact same town, and they've been waiting years for someone to mention it. The shutters came down, the memories didn't.